We have seen that the Neolithic was a massively important epoch in human history, and we have fascinating monuments and settlements all over Britain to study and gain an understanding of ourselves at this time. But travel back beyond the Neolithic and archaeological evidence becomes much more scant. Gone are the monuments and settlements, all we have are the remains of passing groups of hunter-gatherers who tracked the vast plains of wilderness and wildwood. 14,000 years ago, Britain was coming out of the last ice age. With the retreat of the glaciers, a scarred and barren land was left beneath. But quickly plants began to colonise. Mosses and pioneers at first, to be followed by pines, and as the temperature increased, deciduous trees like oak and ash. With the warming climate and melting ice, sea levels too began to rise, and by around 7000 BC, the land bridge between Britain and France was severed. This was the point at which our islands began to take on their present shape, and a trigger for the development of Britain's own traditions. During the Mesolithic, woodland covered practically the whole country, except for the highest mountain tops, which remained as Arctic moorland. Unlike today's woodland, the wildwood was a much more open environment. The tree species were less varied than today, with modern humans introducing many varieties we would now consider wild from abroad. Species such as elm and oak would have been dominant in the lower climes, with scraggy birch dominating the uplands. Familiar species such as fox and red deer would have been present, along with other animals such as wolves and wild boar, which were eventually hunted to extinction. The remains of Mesolithic man in the archaeological record are mainly in the form of microliths. These small shaped flint or chert points were commonly used for hunting, with several fixed together in a wooden shaft to make a successful arrow. Flint and chert were also used to make simple knives and scrapers for removing flesh from the bone. Many of these tools are often found after the soil has been disturbed by ploughing, or on the moors where peat is being eroded. The Mesolithic people were hunter-gatherers who spent their year following traditional migration routes that took them past the best resources as they became available throughout the year. This would usually have entailed being in higher lands in the summer and lower lands in the winter, following the wild game. To find some of the best evidence we have for Mesolithic occupation in the Peak District, we have to come to Stony Lope. High on the limestone plateau with glorious views overlooking Lathkildale and the Wye Valley, this is one of the few areas we can find an understanding of our most distant ancestors. Indeed, the site here dates back to 5,000 years ago, and in this setting, overlooking the Willer Shallows, a local depression, we begin to understand how Mesolithic man functioned within the landscape. Discovered by Mr. Thurston Goodwin of Monash in the 1960s, this alcove behind me proved to be one of the settlements used by prehistoric Mesolithic man as he wandered throughout the landscape 9,500 years ago. The small family would have only occupied this for a temporary period, but the excavations revealed interesting facets of their everyday life. The alcove here has considerably silted up over time. There's 1 to 2 foot of material underneath my feet, and originally the walls beside me here would have been 5 to 7 foot high. Where I'm standing now, there would have been a wooden roof covering the top, and underneath there was a platform where they would lie down, there was a cobbled area, and there was also a central stone where they probably worked their flint and chert. For a few short months, this alcove would have been home for a small family. Along with the sleeping area and platform for manufacturing tools, excavation also uncovered evidence of the hunting of red deer and horse, along with the preparation of animal skins. The small amount found within suggests this was a relatively short occupation period. Looking out from here over the damp hollow and the vast expanse, it's easy to think of Mesolithic man surveying all he could see in front of him. He would have been keeping an eye out and tracking the herds of wild game that followed here. And indeed, within the site, they found the remains of wild deer and horses, perhaps evidence of the last meal they didn't clean up before they left the site. A number of hollows also exist in the fields around. These may have been sinks which would have collected water and so attracted animals. Grey chert axes and brown flint microliths were also recovered by field walking from the slopes below, showing the likelihood that this spot was used for hunting for many seasons.
The trees they do grow high, and the leaves they do grow green, and many's the long and winter's night my love and I have seen. It's a cold winter's night, my love, you and I must lie alone. My bonny boy is young, but he's growing. Oh, father, dear father, you've done to me great wrong, to go and get me married to one who is too young. For he is only 16 years, and I am 21. My bonny boy is young, but he's growing. Oh, daughter, dear daughter, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll send your love to college for another year or two. And all around his college cap we'll tie a ribbon blue, to let the ladies know that he's married. So early, so early, so early the next day, this couple they went out to sport amongst the hay. And what they did there I never will declare, but she never more complained of his growing. At the age of 16 he was a married man, and at the age of 17 the father to a son. And at the age of 18 years the grass grew over him. Cruel death had put an end to his growing.
Towards the end of the Mesolithic, the first signs of the Neolithic farming revolution began to appear. It was at this time that forest clearances began, with small areas of tree cover removed as a hunting strategy. Wild game was attracted to the fresher shoots of newly cut trees rather than the rough old trees of the forest. This made hunting much easier with quarries centred in a small area. Unfortunately, the felling that went on in places such as the Kinder and Bleaklow moors around Edale was not sustainable. Heavy rainfall quickly washed away all ground cover and soil once the trees had been felled, creating a hard and impermeable iron pan. The waterlogging of these areas is what triggered the formation of the first of our moorland areas. As we saw earlier, the massive tracts of moorland on the eastern moors were created by over-farming at the end of the Bronze Age. With a loss of woodland, there was an exponential decrease in the area of suitable habitat for wild animals. The types of game hunted then began to change as many species became endangered. The large herds of reindeer which once tracked to the north now gave way to scattered herds of deer, which were much more difficult to find in the forests. This resulted in reduced cycles of movement as families tracked through smaller and smaller areas of suitable habitat. This also led to a decrease in the variety of tools and raw materials used, for without travelling such great distances, many were no longer attainable. Perfect evidence of this comes from the Peak District's flint finds. In the early Mesolithic, many were from locations such as Yorkshire, but by the late Mesolithic, all became locally sourced. The downward spiral is part of what triggered people to adopt farming, not just a process out of the blue, but one which had been foreshadowed when man first started to have an impact on his landscape during the Mesolithic. As times change, so too do the seasons. and autumn is fast approaching.
The green elm with the one great bough of gold lets leaves into the grass slip, one by one. The short hill grass, the mushrooms small milk white, harebell and scabus and tormentil, that blackberry and gorse in dew and sun bow down to, and the wind travels too light to shake the fallen birch leaves from the fern. The gossamers wander at their own will. Some day I shall think this a happy day, and its moon by the name of melancholy shall no more blackened and obscured be.
On the eastern bank of the River Derwent is Chatsworth Old Park, a small fragment of what was a much larger deer park. The ancient pollardied oaks provide a direct link back over half a millennia, with some of the living trees over 400 years old. This looks much as it would have done during medieval times, particularly as it once formed the edge of the great royal hunting forest of Sherwood. Due to the stability of this ancient wood pasture, it has a complex invertebrate fauna found nowhere else in the Peak District. The last of the summer insects are now dying. Their young will carry on the life cycle and take to the wing next year. This small tortoiseshell was the last butterfly of the year, one dewy autumnal morning. Some butterflies hibernate over the winter months, in ivy bushes, the crooks of trees, caves and lofts. If you see one, don't disturb it. He will fly off with the first spring sun. This is the long-abandoned Millersdale Quarry, and its fractured walls are now home to the distinctive, deep, harsh croak of the raven. The biggest member of the crow family, ravens are no longer as populous as they once were, with only around 8,000 breeding pairs in Britain. They prefer the mountainous uplands, their thick black feathers helping to retain heat. They are also aided by an omnivorous diet and will feed on anything they can, from berries to carrion. Ravens have appeared many times in folklore and are often seen to be unlucky portents of death. In the great Anglo-Saxon poem Beowulf is written, "Craving for carrion, the dark raven shall have its say, and tell the eagle how it fared at the feast, when, competing with the wolf, it laid bare the bones of corpses." While walking the forest in autumn, amongst the rustling leaves we have all seen the emergence of mushrooms and toadstools. Traditionally we refer to the edible varieties as mushrooms and the inedible ones as toadstools, but scientifically that distinction bears no weight. All mushrooms and toadstools are simply the fruiting bodies of fungi. Fungi are one of the most basic components of any ecosystem, breaking down dead material and returning its nutrients to the soil. Originally thought to be plants, they are in fact in a kingdom of their own and bear more characteristics than animals than plants. Although incredibly prolific and important, we barely notice them until they send their bizarre mushrooms up to spread their spores. The shaggy inkcap is a common fungus often seen growing in the woods. The young fruit bodies first appear as white cylinders before the bell-shaped caps open out. The gills beneath the cap quickly turn black and secrete a black liquid filled with spores, a process called deliquescence. Although this takes several days in the wild, this mushroom is unusual because it will turn black and dissolve itself in a matter of hours after being picked. When young, it is an excellent edible mushroom, provided it's eaten quickly. Centuries ago, writing ink was made from the shaggy ink cap by boiling them in water with cloves. This fungus is known as a puffball. They produce their spores inside a spherical fruiting body, which when it reaches maturity either shoots up its spores with the falling pressure of raindrops or simply by opening to the wind. Allow me to illustrate. The morel has a distinctive honeycomb appearance, with long ridges and pits running across its cap. Some members of the family are edible and prized by gourmet chefs, but others are inedible. With any wild mushroom, it's best not to take the risk of eating and just appreciate it for its bizarre beauty. Undoubtedly, the most iconic and distinctive of British fungi is the fly agaric. With its red cap and white spots, it has been featured in literature and paintings for centuries. The spots are actually remnants of the white veil of tissue that first enclosed the young mushroom. The name fly refers to its use in many parts of Europe where it was crushed and mixed with milk to be used as an insecticide. Fly agaric is both toxic and strongly hallucinogenic, and one of the effects of consumption is a perceived distortion in the size of objects. Allegedly, Lewis Carroll's hookah-smoking caterpillar in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was inviting her to take a bite from a fly agaric. A mushroom you have probably not seen is this, the pink ballerina. It is very rare in the countryside and is a member of the waxcap family, which like nutrient-deprived soils. In England, this usually equates to high pastoral locations where animals are fed in the day and removed to lower ground at night, not returning their consumed nutrients back to the soil. Its flared, radially split caps do give it the appearance of a pirouetting ballet dancer. The pink waxcap grows just below White Nancy, and in the lee of this great tree remained unnoticed until the 1990s. As the days draw on, the skies turn grey and the chill of winter is on the horizon. In late October, when the sky is clear at night, temperatures rapidly drop in the hills and the cool air sinks to the bottom of the warmer valleys. This reduces the air temperature to the condensation point and triggers the formation of the most beautiful of weather features, the autumn mists.
fading as your love returns to me. The dawn unveils forgotten thoughts. Unfinished dreams begin to fade from view.
Wake me now, morning sky.
Reprieve the colors that the night removes. Open your eyes, let the light linger through, and soon you'll see visions of our heart falling away from the sky as they plunge to the earth, fading as your love returns to me. Oh, wake me soon, rising sun. Release me, take me, let me feel your light. Release me, take me, let me feel your light.
In the 8th century, the Catholic Church chose November the 1st as All Saints' Day, a festival to honour any saint who didn't have their own day. The Mass said on that day was called All Hallows Mass, and so the night before became All Hallows Eve. But the festival we celebrate on the 31st of October has more to do with its pagan origins, for this is the ancient festival of Samhain, the beginning of the Celtic New Year. The old year has passed, the harvest has been reaped, and life has retreated from the world. This was a time for honouring the spirits of the ancestors who came before, not just ancient, but those recently dearly departed. Our modern Halloween celebrations are a far cry from their roots. But one festival more in touch with its roots takes place just a few days later and fills the autumn sky with light. Bonfire Night's origins date back to the 5th of November 1605, when Guy Fawkes' ill-made plan to blow up the Houses of Parliament was foiled. Knowing that their king had been saved, Londoners joyfully lit bonfires that evening in thanksgiving, and as the years progressed the ritual became more and more elaborate. Soon effigies of Guy Fawkes and even his wife, Mrs. Fawkes, were thrown onto the bonfire to cheer and song. In some parts of the country, effigies of the Pope even graced the pyres, though now they are seen as a tradition rather than a political statement. Nowadays, though the festival still makes headlines each year with people presenting often unduly sensitive attitudes to many of the evening's activities, we enjoy it all the more.
Right, show it turning.
Do away.
You know where I'm at.
Things go a bit wrong for a bit. Right, going. We're going. You still wanted to warm up?